Hi Gators! I hope you're doing well. We really miss you. We are ready to start chapter 12. Now, chapter 12 is our unit on geometry. Geometry is the study of shapes. So there's going to be a lot of vocabulary in this chapter, and I highly recommend that if you have your large Go Math text, you go ahead and rip out the vocabulary builder and fill it out as we go through our lessons. Now that doesn't mean you fill it all out today, but fill it out as you discover new words to describe shapes. And with that in mind, we're going to jump into today's lesson. So today is 12.1, and we're going to work on how to describe something called plane shapes. So plane shape is a shape that is on a flat surface, and it is formed by points that make curved paths, line segments, or both. So what that looks like are these shapes right here, and you probably recognize a lot of them, but I could start drawing these at any one point and use either a curved line or a straight line to get back to that point. So if we see here, I could start here and use line segments to reach back to that same point. So these are all representatives of plane shapes. Now, what is a point? When they say a point, they just mean an exact spot or location. So when we look at a number line, for example, we put our spots on our number line, correct? Those are points, and we use points in shapes to help us talk about where lines start and where lines end. But what is a line, right? A line is a straight path that goes in both directions, and it doesn't ever end. So a number line, for example, when you think of a number line, it goes on either way and it doesn't end. So I could go 5, 6, 7, 8, or I could go back from 5 and go 4, 3, 2, 1, but both directions go on forever. Now, you can't make a shape out of lines. And that sounds crazy because that's what we say, right? Draw a line to make this shape. But a true line doesn't end. So if I drew these shapes or tried to draw these shapes with lines, these lines would go on forever. And I would only have this small section where they intersect. So what actually makes up a shape, like a triangle, are what are called line segments. Now a line segment is a piece of a line, and you can tell it's a piece because it has two endpoints. Now these two endpoints tell us that the line ends. If you see an arrow, it means it keeps going, right? But these endpoints tell us that this line ends. It's a segment or a piece, that's what segment means, of a line. So here we can look at our triangle and see that we have a line segment here, a line segment here, and a line segment here, right? But not 3 lines, 3 line segments. All right, we're almost through our vocabulary for today. Now, what are endpoints? Those are just points used to show a segment of a line or a piece. It tells us, hey, here's the end of the line. A point that goes at the end, right? Now, there's one more word, and we're not going to use this too much today, but it's important to know. So we learned that a line never ends, so it has arrows on both sides showing us that it keeps going on. We learned that a line segment ends on both sides and has endpoints. But is there any combination of an endpoint with an arrow? There is, and that's called a ray. Now, when you think of a ray, think of like a ray of sunshine. Has your parent ever said, honey, you're a ray of sunshine, or the rays of the sun can be harmful? So a ray is a straight section of a line, but this line has one endpoint, and then it continues on in one direction. So we know where it starts, or maybe where it ends, but then it goes on forever in the other direction. So if we think about the rays of the sun, they start at the sun and then they go out from the sun. So they don't go into the sun. That wouldn't make sense. So we have an endpoint and then the rays flow outwards on and on and on. All right. So just to wrap up, our main idea for today is that plane shapes are made up by connecting line segments at their endpoints. All right. And if you take one thing away from today's lesson, let it be this big idea. All right, Gators? So let's look at what kind of questions they're going to ask you and how we can use these words to help us describe plane shapes, right? Before we dive in, I want to just clarify what a plane shape is. So plane shapes have length and they have a width but they don't have a thickness to them. I can draw it on a paper and that's it. There's all there is to that shape. There's no thickness. They're also called two-dimensional because of this, because we talk about them in 2 dimensions, width and length. Now, if you've ever gone to the movies, you might have seen something called 3D. So 3-dimensional would be something like a cube or a pyramid. That's something where we talk about the height, the length, and the width. So there are 3 measures or 3 dimensions that we talk about. So plane shapes are those 2D shapes. All right, let's look at a practice problem. So I've drawn a square. A square has blank line segments. The line segments meet only at their what? So let's look. How many line segments do we see here? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So there are 4 line segments in a square, or those 4 sides, right? And where do they meet? Where do those line segments meet? They meet at these end points. So I'm going to go ahead and write in endpoints. All right, let's try this. If we were told to draw some plane shapes, there are 2 types of plane shapes that we could draw. So one type of plane shape is called a closed shape, and that just means that it starts and ends at the same point. So it looks like a closed figure. If I put water inside this shape, it wouldn't spill because these shapes are closed, right? And you can see I started drawing here, I went back around, I ended here. I started drawing here, I went back around. They all start and end at that same point, right? The second kind, you can probably guess, would be an open shape. So an open shape does not start and end at the same point. They look like they're open. So if I put water or tried to fill this shape with water, the water would fall out if I started turning that shape or doing anything to that shape because it's open. And so are all these. They have an open space, right? They don't start and end at the same point. If I started here, I would end here. If I started here, I would end here. If I started here, I would end here. So is this plane shape open or closed? And see if you can explain. It's closed, right? So I could choose where I wanted to start this, but if I put water in this shape, no matter what way I turned or moved this shape, that water would stay inside because that shape is closed. It starts and it ends at the same point. All right, go ahead and grab a separate piece of paper and a pencil if you want to work along with me today. If you want and have your Go Math textbook, you can go ahead and pull it out to lesson 12.1 as many of these problems can be found in our lesson. All right, please feel free to pause the video at any time if you need to go a little bit slower than I'm going, or if you want to work through the problems on your own for extra practice. So our first practice question that you might see asks, how many line segments does this shape have? So go ahead and take a moment and pause your video and work through it. All right, I'm going to start counting. I see 1 segment here. I see a 2nd segment here. I see a 3rd here, a 4th here, a 5th here, and a 6th here. So that has 6 line segments, and that makes it a hexagon. All right. Are these shapes open or closed? So for each of these shapes, let's either write an O for open or a C for closed. So let's look at our first one. I see here that this line seems to start here, but there's a little bit of an open space and it ends there. So that would make this an open shape. What about this shape? It looks like an arrow. It would be closed, right? If I started here and I followed my lines around, it does come all the way back to that point. So this is a closed shape. What about this shape that looks a little bit like a letter C? Well, if I started here and I follow my line around, it ends at a different point. So that means that this shape is open. I can get through it, right? Here I have another closed shape, right? If I follow my lines, it is closed. It starts and ends at the same point. And last but not least, if I start here and I follow my lines around, I end here at a different point, which means this is an open shape. All right, so many of the questions you're going to face today are just that simple. They're going to be asking you to count your line segments. They're going to ask you to use them to describe an open shape or a closed shape. So good luck, Gators. And if you have any questions, go ahead and rewatch this video and work through the problems again. Bye.